If you are struggling to understand how to use the different tenses in English, then I am so glad you have found me. Welcome to Learn English with Natalie. Today we're going to be talking about using the present tense in English. Now this is part 3 on my course of present tense, so make sure you visit the past 2 episodes where I dive into the present tense even further. The present tense is essential for discussing facts, habits, routines, and ongoing actions, so you're always going to be using this in your English language. Mastering the present tense will help you to communicate clearly and confidently. So today, we're going to focus on forming questions in the present tense. Now, building on what we learnt last week and the week before, we're going to talk about the simple present, which helps us to describe habits and routines. So if you remember, we use the word do or does, depending on who we're talking about, plus the subject, so who it is we're talking about, and then the base verb. Here are some example questions. Do you play tennis? Do you play tennis? The word do, and then the subject you. Do you play tennis? Next sentence. Does she live nearby? Does she live nearby? So instead of using do this time, I use the word does. This is very similar to the work that we did last week, so you might find this easier this week. Does she live nearby? Now here's a top tip for learning English. If you are using the word do, then you are talking about I. So I do or do I. If you were talking about you use the word do. Again, you do or do you if you're asking a question. And again, if you're talking about they, you also use the word do. They do or do they. If you were talking about he or she, you use the word does. Does she or she does. And he does, or if you're asking a question, does he? You just flip them around. Don't worry if you don't understand just yet. We're going to have a look at some example sentences. So I'm going to use the word do first of all, because I'm talking about you. Do you speak English? I'm going to say that one more time, and then you can repeat after me. Do you speak English? Your turn. Wonderful. My turn. Does she like ice cream? Your turn. Fantastic. Do they play tennis after school? Your turn. Wonderful. My turn. Does he work on weekends? Your turn. Fantastic. Do we need more sugar? Your turn. Excellent. Now I'm just going to go over that rule one more time to help your understanding. If I'm talking about you, I, or they, I use the word do. So do you, do they, do we. If I'm talking about he or she, which is a third person singular subject, I use does. Does she, does he. Now we're going to have a look at a different way of forming questions in the present tense. And we're going to use the present continuous. Again, this is building on what we did last week. So the present continuous helps us to describe actions that are happening right now. We use the words am, is, or are to start our sentences, followed by the subject, and depending on the subject, that will determine if you use am, is, or are. We'll go into that in a second. And then we follow that with the verb. And the verb is followed by ing. Now, this will become a bit clearer in a moment. So I'm going to use the word are because I'm talking about they. Are they, and then my verb plus ing. Are they coming to the meeting? Are they coming to the meeting? And now for this next sentence, I'm talking about he. So instead of using are, I'm going to use the word is. Is he studying for the test? Now, here's a top tip to remember when learning English. If you are talking about I, you say am. I am coming. If you are talking about he, she, or it, you use is. He is studying, or is he studying? If you are talking about you, we, or they, you say are. Are they coming? Are you getting a taxi? We're going to have a look at some example sentences now to make this a bit clearer for you. My turn. Am I doing this correctly? So this is a question now. We're forming questions this week. If I was to swap the I and am around, it would become a statement. So it would become I am doing this correctly. But as a question, am I doing this correctly? Your turn. Fantastic. My turn. Is she working on the project now? Your turn. Wonderful. Are they playing football outside? Your turn. Excellent. Is he coming to the meeting today? Your turn. Brilliant. Are we studying together this evening? Your turn. Excellent. Now it's activity time. This week, I want you to write a list of 5 questions in the present tense and practice using these questions with your friends this week. I would love to see what you come up with, so please make sure you reach out to me on TikTok or YouTube at Learn English with Natalie. And I'm also available on Patreon at Learn English with Natalie. Now, if you're a bit of a reading fanatic like I am and you're interested in learning English through books, then you may want to consider joining my Patreon. On Patreon, I will be delivering exclusive content where I will help you further your English by exploring English novels, both classic and modern novels. So if you are interested in reading stories and you want to improve your English even further, then please check that out. All of my information is available in the show notes. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode, where I'll be covering more information about the tenses to further your understanding. See you next week.